Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to Worldhoppers. Worldhoppers sound like hoppers. This is a collaborative channel where all of the AdSense revenue goes to charity as well as merch sale profit. And today we're going to be talking about underrated and underhyped books, kind of a combination of both. And we do have some prompts, but also we might just be talking about underrated and underhyped books. And we're just going to kick it off, just starting with underhyped, something you don't think is popular enough, and Jesse will go ahead and get us started on this one.
No. Oh no. Okay, all right. So I'm actually gonna go with The Wolf by Leo Carew. I'm gonna channel Leanna here and say something that she probably would have said if she had been on this video. We read this last year for a shelf space month, and it was her pick. And I know it's one of her favorites. And I know that this one had mixed reviews from the people who did read it. Elle, I think that
behind my water bottle.
Mixed feelings. But I have to say, I was just really impressed with the intricacies of like wartime strategy in this book. Like, this is like military fantasy. Like, if you're a fan of like military strategy and that kind of politicking, this is a great one for that. And the second book, The Spider, I think improves upon this first book in every possible way. Like, the second book is fascinating characters, fascinating wartime strategies, just so good. And I don't see a whole lot of people talk about it except for Leanna. So I got to give a shout out to The Wolf. It's very, very good.
I think too, with the military politicking, it's kind of like everything that is involved before actually fighting.
Yes.
All the things to do to weaken your enemy, to weaken their image. I did enjoy that part of the book for sure.
Yeah, it was really cool. And the second book just like gets even better with that kind of stuff. Like, if you don't love like long fight scenes and war scenes, but you like all of like the strategizing and politicking leading up to it, oh, so good. So good.
How about you, Roger?
I'll go with, oh, it's so shiny. A Spell for Chameleon by Pierce Anthony. It's book one in the Xanth series. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody ever talk about it on BookTube. It's older fantasy, kind of sword and sorcery, but if you like very tongue-in-cheek humor with puns with your fantasy, then it doesn't get much better than this. So, I mean, they're very short, they're very fun, they're very fast. It's basically like everybody in this world has a special magic that is unique to them. And the main character, Bink, thinks he doesn't have magic, but the like kind of Merlin type character of the kingdom thinks he does. And so he goes on an adventure. And there's things like nightmares are actual horses that invade your dreams and all that kind of like punny, good dad jokey type stuff.
That sounds like Jesse's kind of book.
I know, I just added it. That sounds so great.
All right, so for me, I'm going to go with a general fiction book, and I'm going to say the final revival of Opal and Nev. I feel like this was a little bit popular on BookTube when it first came out, and people were like adding it to their TBRs, but no one actually read it. And it reminds me of Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is super popular. It's like an oral history about a band. It's a duo, actually. It's not a band. The female main character is Black, and the guy is a white guy. And in one of their concerts, a Black man dies. It's set in like the 70s. And the oral history is like in the future, kind of talking to these people in the duo about what happened and all these different things. It's so much better than Daisy Jones and the Six, in my opinion. Like, I hated that book. I don't know, so well written. I know, I'm sorry. I do love The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and then I read Daisy Jones and the Six because of it, but I was like, this is terrible. This is super good. So
I do have that one. I just bought it, so I'm very excited to read that one.
It's really good.
That it's really good, like Daisy Jones.
Pretty sure you just got canceled, Ingrid.
I know, sorry. What?
Which one came out first?
Daisy Jones and the Six. This is a newer release.
Okay.
I think like last year or so.
I've seen them both, but I don't typically do those. I don't know what it is, that style of book. I'm like, oh, real people. Like, not actually real people.
So boring.
Like, contemporary type of book.
Yeah.
Every now and then I get sucked in, but to me, those kinds of stories remind me of the show Mad Men, where like when you're engaged with it, it is engaging. But then once I'm done with it, I'm like, man, so much drama. Like I don't want to go back to that. But I don't know. Every now and then I'm like, maybe I should bite the bullet and actually try one. I feel kind of bad because I feel like a lot of the books I talk about are underrated or underhyped. So I'm like, what do I say here? Because I was looking at some of my favorites and I'm like,
Ninth Rain.
It's near me. But I was like, I should probably mention something else. So I'm going to mention a few really quick for underhyped. Mask of Mirrors. This is a somewhat newer release. It came out last year, and its sequel came out last year, which I'm hoping to read very soon. But it has this Venetian feeling type of fantasy setting, and we follow a con artist who's trying to con her way into what is essentially like we'll call it a noble house, but they're on the brink of bankruptcy, and so they're highly suspicious of everyone, which makes her con that much harder. And then there's different kinds of magic systems, and the magic systems are somewhat rooted in sort of the upper classes and then the lower classes. So there's a lot of really cool magic, some like dream type magic, and I call it fortune teller magic is the other kind of like prophecy centered magic or predicting the future. So I think it's a really interesting setting, and it's not the easiest to get into because it's filled with a lot of fantasy names, and everything to do with the city and everything like that kind of takes a while to get sucked in. But I also think that when we read epic fantasy or high fantasy, that we're so used to, I don't know if you all feel this way, but different characters being in different places. And you would think that would make it harder, but then you start to associate like that person lives in the desert, that person lives in the cold place. But here it's like everybody lives in the city. So you're like, who is this again? And you're trying to figure out who's who. But I just think that the way everybody's trying to kind of pull one on each other is really engaging. And then again, I'm just going to briefly mention that I think Fireborn and Ninth Rain are great today. I know.
There they are.
I have both of those because of you, but I just haven't picked them up.
I think Ninth Rain has only in the 3,000s for the amount of ratings. And then I think Fireborn has less than 6,000, I think.
I bet when those fancy editions come out.
What?
I bet when those fancy editions come out, the Ninth Rain will get a lot more.
There's fancy editions?
Yeah, the Broken Binding is doing it as part of their subscription.
Excuse me while I go check this out.
They haven't posted anything yet. I should be seeing mock-ups soon. I'm so excited. Not that I have any say in it. I just
that's so cool.
On the lookout. But I'm so excited. But anyway, this trilogy is complete. So for those of you that like to wait until a series is done before you pick it up, this one's complete. Fireborn, the third one, comes out this year, and that will be the end of the trilogy. And Fireborn, most of you know, is kind of a Russian Revolution inspired fantasy, but if the Russian Revolution had dragons is the idea. And the Ninth Rain, I don't even know where to begin because there's so much to it. Just know it's epic fantasy at its finest. It's so good. And it's really fun. I think sometimes epic fantasy can be daunting and difficult to get into. And this one, it does take a while because the world's really big. But once you kind of start to piece things together, the characters are pretty funny and they're all really flawed, but generally you definitely root for them. So I had to mention them just because they still, even though I'm constantly talking about them, I was like, I need more people though. So I had to mention them. Sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
Underrated.
Okay, I've got a couple. All right, I have two. One of them's way more well-known. So I'll start with the lesser-known one. Upon a Burning Throne by Ashraf K. Banker. This one, I think, has like a 3.4 on Goodreads, and I don't understand why. It's really cool. It's like a Indian-inspired fantasy, and it's so epic in scope. It is a little bit slow, and it is quite large, so it's quite intimidating. But like once you get started in it, I just like couldn't stop reading it. I thought it was so well written and beautifully told, and it has like this royal family where every like generation there's a new heir to the Burning Throne that gets selected, and this generation there's two children that are selected for the Burning Throne, and each of them have what's considered in this world to be a disability, where one of them's albino and one of them's blind. So by ruling together, they kind of have like combined power, sort of. But they have other like nations trying to kind of vie for the throne because of that. So it's really fascinating, like royal politics, but the magic in it is so unique because I had never read any Indian inspired fantasy before, and just the mythology and the gods and how cool the magic is. It's so unique. Like, it's so good, but I can see where maybe people think it's a little slow. So I can understand that, but I thought it was fantastic. So
it's a translated work too, right?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
And is it, so that author is very popular in other countries,
in
right?
India, yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's written so many books, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's written a ton of other books that are very popular in India. But this one I think was more for a Western audience. I'm not quite sure. But it just isn't as popular, I guess. And I think it's fantastic. So
reading some of the reviews, do you think it has to do, because I've found that with we're so accustomed to Western inspired inspirations that we almost don't need the world building to be as fleshed out, because we're kind of like, I know about Fae, or I know about like knights and all those kinds of things. But then when you get stories from other that are inspired from other countries, then all of a sudden there's this like, I don't know what's going on kind of feeling, because you're accustomed to it. So it might require maybe more work on the reader's end to, do you think that's part of it?
It could be. It definitely could be. I'd looked at like a couple reviews saying that they just thought it was slow. I didn't really see any that called that out specifically, but it might have been a part of some of it. I'm not sure. It is something that like is very unique, like very much unlike anything you had read before in fantasy. So yeah, I do think it requires a little bit more work on the reader, but it's worth it. I think it's totally worth it. It's really good. And
I don't have the deep question, but I have the important question. Are your hands just small, or is that book massive?
It's really big. It's really big. Like,
okay.
Also, here I'll add to the not important at all. I feel like my water bottle perfectly.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it does.
And how cool is this cover? It's so beautiful.
It is really. The sequel's cover is beautiful too.
Yeah, it is. And so is the third one. They all have beautiful covers. And then the more well-known one that I just think it's very underrated. Like, it's not underhyped, but I think its rating is really low, and I get it. But it's an Enchantment of Ravens.
Yeah, I'm with you on
it's so
that
good.
I agree.
It is.
It's very cute. It's just sweet. And I think, a lot of people are like, insta-love, blah. But, like, I think that's not, like, the whole point of the story. Like, I love the theme around, like, how beautiful it is to be human in these stories. Like, the story was so sweet. And, like, it was like a cute little fluffy romance. Like, I just loved it. It was very fairy tale.
It both benefited and to its detriment. It being around the ACOTAR, excitement, because the girl's a painter. There's a Fae man. Like, I think the parallels, people were like, it's just a copy. Like, I saw some people upset by that, or some people expecting it to be like ACOTAR, which is a lot more angsty, and Enchantment of Ravens is much cuter. And so I think some people were just like, it's not ACOTAR. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. It's not Enchantment of Ravens. But I get that it did come out around the same time. I get the parallels. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's surprisingly low. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's very cute story too.
Yeah.
I think, and maybe I'm completely wrong, so you three can chime in on this. I think books that are cute but marketed more for the love stories tend to have lower ratings than books that are maybe more like sexy. Do you think that's true, or do you think that not sexy like 50 Shades sexy, because there's a certain level where it just becomes a joke, but there's like spot in the middle that I think certain books, they tap into something that, I don't know, tends to
senior books.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like you're hinting at that Persephone retelling again.
Which one?
I'm not. That one does not. That one.
Game of Fate.
Oh
is it steamy?
Yeah, I read Neon Gods, and if it's anything like Neon Gods, it's very stimming.
It's probably.
Oh yeah.
It's probably like. It sounds like the same book if you read
feel
the
like-
synopsis.
Yeah.
Roger, you just wanted to start trouble.
I feel like Neon Gods is rated well, but this isn't about.
I think Neon Gods might be rated lower than.
Oh, it's actually not. It's
Yeah.
not rated that well. So maybe not. I don't know. Good
That's
question.
not what I was talking about. I just feel like some of those cuter ones, maybe it's because it's truly young adult and not adult. Maybe that's part of it. Because I have seen in talking to some romance readers, if it's too like PG or maybe PG-13, then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, come on, like I wanted
all the
sex
steam.
adult. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see.
Anyway, Roger, stirring the pot. You tell us what an underrated book.
Okay, well, I have two, but the first one, I'm just going off the deep end today. I'm talking about books that nobody else talks about on BookTube, so you're welcome. So
Yay!
this is A Terrible Fall of Angels, and it's not rated that low. I looked and it's like 3.81, but it's urban fantasy, and stuff like Dresden Files is rated at like 4, and I just don't get it. So this author is pretty well known off of BookTube, I would say, and this is like her brand new series with only has one book in it. And it follows Zaniel Havelock, and he is an angel speaker, but it's not like Christian angels. They're more just like beings of light and sound that he can channel. And the magic in this world is basically people can channel different kinds of spirits. So like this one lady channels like raccoon and bear spirits. He channels from angels and stuff like that. And then he used to be an angel speaker and got like fed up with the organization and is now a cop. And it's like a murder mystery type deal.
Wait, this
So
sounds
that's the first one.
A Terrible Fall of Angels. Okay.
Yeah, by Laurel K. Hamilton. And she has other stuff too, but those are much more, they lean into the romancy erotica sometimes. They get a little like,
That's the one that has like the like tentacle.
that's her Fae series. There's
Oh,
tentacles with suckers on the end, so like I'm sure you
Ooh.
can imagine.
Oh boy.
But not in that lane. We'll dive in. So I've been talking a lot about the Forgotten Realms recently, and so everybody and their mom always talks about Drizzt Do'Urden, and they think that that's like synonymous with the Forgotten Realms, but that's a lie. And so this book I think is like rated 3.7 or something like that, and it's just a cute little trilogy. It's very like classic fantasy. Like girl doesn't know she has power, but she finds out that she can channel like the raw essence of magic. And a bunch of the political faction in this world basically want to use her as a weapon because like magic can't stop her power. And so it's just fun. It's great. And nobody else talks about the Forgotten Realms but me and that one other person, but we won't talk about that.
okay, now you're stirring the pot on yourself.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Oh my god.
Oh, Roger, you killed me. Anyway, I have one that's underrated, but then I have one that's also underhyped. Can I talk about it? I forgot to mention it before. Okay. The underrated one is called I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This is a Netflix book because they put the damn sticker, so it's popular, but it's like rated 3.5 stars on Goodreads. And this is a horror book. And it starts out like this couple is on a trip. They're like doing a road trip. And the female character is thinking throughout the trip that she's thinking of ending things with a guy. And you're mainly in her head. And then they're supposed to be going to see his parents at their house. And it's like super creepy. All this stuff starts happening. But I feel like the reason it's underrated is because of the ending, like the twist at the end. You're either really going to love it like I did, or you're going to hate it. So, but it's very good.
Is it like
And
an
then-
open ending?
What?
I love those.
Is it
Is it
open?
Open
No, you actually do get. Have you read The Cabin in the Woods by The Cabin at the End of the Lane? Not the
ending. The
Woods.
Cabin at the End of the World?
The World. Wow.
love that.
These are all books, by the way. They actually, the names are. You love that one? I was going to say
love
that has an open ending. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the underhyped book that I forgot to talk about earlier is The Falconer by Elizabeth
Oh.
May. Have you guys read this? Have you heard
but
about
I've
it?
seen
No.
it and been very intrigued by it.
Yeah, so this is kind of an older book, so I don't know if it's underhyped because of that. Came out in like 2014, but it's very good. It's like in par. Oh, we match. It's like on par with Sarah J. Maas, I think. It's about Faye. Like the main character is the last of the Falconers, which is like a line of warrior women that are meant to kill Faye. And this is set in like 1844 in Edinburgh, in Scotland. So it has a lot of those like historical things. She's supposed to be a lady and all these things, but she's a Fae hunter on the side. It's very good. I absolutely loved it when I read the series, and I think there's only like 50,000 ratings, which is kind of low for a book that came out in like 2014. So yeah.
Is it pretty highly rated at the very least?
Let me look. I actually didn't look at that. The Falconer.
I have been intrigued by that one.
3.7. So it's not super high.
Yeah, underrated.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't read it just based off of that number. For underrated, I'm going to say The Wolf of Oran Yaru, because I think this one is 3.69, I believe. And I personally think the writing itself and the voice of the main character is done really well. It is somewhat meandering, so I think that if someone's a plot-driven reader, the plot is basically like survive. And that's not really, there's not a set goal necessarily aside from trying to survive and get back to her former power, if you will. So it follows a woman who is a queen, and there's a bunch of people that are wanting her throne, and her husband had abandoned her at one point and left, but she still needs him for political purposes. And you don't know as the reader what caused him to leave. And she has an opportunity to meet with him again. And she doesn't know if it's a trap. She doesn't know if it's even him that she's going to be meeting. She also has a son that this is the father of her son. So that's like another reason that she feels like she has to try and patch things up. And then she goes to meet him, and then things go from there. And I've read the first 2 books. I'm hoping to read the 3rd one here really soon. But I really enjoy the character. Like I said, it is kind of meandering. And I would say because it's first person, basically just from her the whole time, the world building kind of comes to you as the story progresses. And instead of it being like here's this world, here's how the magic works. It's not as laid out cleanly the way you see in some other fantasy books, but I just really enjoy following this character. She also, I will say, she's got a lot of bravado. Sometimes she's like, yeah, go ahead and try or whatever. And then she'll just get beat up. And you're like, why did you do that? You're clearly not as skilled as this person. And so she can be kind of hot-headed. But what I like about it is I think it's fitting when you get snippets of her past, you understand why she's kind of grown up with this haughty attitude. And when that gets challenged, I find it somewhat amusing because I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's right. You're not all that, which I actually kind of enjoy seeing. But I do really enjoy her ferocity because she really cares about her child and she does whatever she has to. And I just enjoy following her as a character. Now, the next one is popular on BookTube, but not elsewhere. So basically outside of BookTube. Because I don't know, I feel like a lot of us, we see the same books talked about over and over on BookTube, and then we're surprised when we look at the amount of ratings that it's not very much. So I thought this one would be a fun one to chat about. Jesse, you want to go first?
I thought I had one. Let me check how popular this one is. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's only 30,000 ratings. Okay. I think Roger will agree with me on this one.
He's like, what?
Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan. It has 30,000 ratings, which I feel like is somewhat low for a big fantasy book. And I do feel like Michael J. Sullivan himself is very popular on BookTube. Maybe not this particular series quite as much as like the Rhaeria Revelations, starting with like the Theft of Swords and all that. but Legend of the First Empire is so good. I love it so much. I'm trying to get Al to read it. It's so good.
Read it. Read it.
Read
I
it.
will.
Cast of characters. Like, I don't know how Michael J. Sullivan writes like some of my favorite female characters of all time. Like, I love the way he writes his characters in this. And it's just like a classic fantasy world. Like, it's humans, elves, dwarves, and maybe some other stuff. But those are like the three main kind of fantasy races. And it's very like basic. Like, that's a very basic fantasy setup. But just the way he puts his own spin on it, and the characters, it's so good. It's so
Shauna
good.
was meant to join us for this video in the same
Yeah.
way that Leanna.
Channeling.
Yeah,
Just
she's channeling our friends because you mentioned the one Leanna probably would have said. Now you're mentioning the one Shauna might have said.
Yes.
You're representing other world hoppers.
Yes. I feel like this would also be a really good TV show. I'm just saying. It would be really
Yeah, and he does emotional gut punches. Like, they kind of sneak up on you and you're not expecting it. And you're like, sir.
How dare you?
Bawled because I know you just read the second book, right, Roger? And you didn't like this much, right?
I was like, no, but then the ending, I was like, rude.
I bawled like a baby at the end of the second one. Yeah, so the emotional stakes in this series, they're very high, I would say.
I almost feel like you could mention sort of Kaigen under this category because I think it's
that's a good one.
I think it has gotten a lot of popularity over the years from BookTube and just people who pay attention to self-pub books and whatnot. But I don't think most people would know outside of, unless you're involved in little bookish communities online. But you talking about bawling your eyes out, I know you also.
Sword of Kaigen. Oh my god, couldn't even see the pages through my tears.
You're not alone. I know a lot of other people. Not me. I don't cry when I read.
I can't believe Sword of Kaigen didn't get you.
Nothing does.
Nothing.
Things make me emotional, but books don't make
Heartless.
me cry.
I don't know. I
Inhuman.
think Age of Swords might get you a little choked up, maybe.
I don't know.
Oh, especially with things that you love in your life. I mean, we'll see. I think it might.
I know. I'm trying to.
You know what? I don't even. Whose phone is that? Okay. I don't even want to say what I now think it is because I don't want to spoil for anyone.
Don't say it.
Gosh darn it. Thanks, Roger.
You don't even know, though. It could be lots of things.
Maybe I don't. I don't know. We'll find out.
There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, I plan to read it. I really do. I just
It's so good.
other things at the moment. Anyway, Roger, popular on BookTube, but not elsewhere.
Okay, so I feel like he gets talked about a lot on BookTube. So this, oh god, it's scary. Jay Kristoff gets talked about a lot on BookTube, and so this is Empire of the Vampire, which I just looked at, has 18,000 ratings, which seems pretty low.
It is low.
Yeah.
And I loved it. So, and I'll just here, you can enjoy the beauty. You're welcome.
Oh,
Ooh, pretty.
She's gorgeous.
That is the best Illumicrate book. It's so
So it's a start to, I don't know how many books it's going to be, but it's vampires being mean, horrible people, and it's kind of that like Name of the Wind type setup or Interview with the Vampire type setup where it's somebody kind of telling you their life story, and it has three main timelines that it goes through. It goes through the current day timeline where he's a prisoner and he's basically being extorted to tell his story, and then it goes through some of the events leading up to how he got imprisoned, and then when he was younger being trained as a silver saint, which is part of this order to hunt vampires. And it's great. I know that some people don't love Jay Kristoff because he is quite edgy, and some of the like jokes and swears and stuff that he does are, if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, you probably really don't, but I think it's really good.
I am curious to read that one. It's just so intimidating.
I know.
It was my favorite book that I read last year, but it is a chonker.
I didn't realize it was your favorite from last year.
Sure was. Otherwise, why would I have paid so much money for this? Because the aftermarket on like Illumicrate is just rude.
It is.
Extortion, thievery, shenanigans.
How dare you?
I cannot even. Oh my gosh! When I did that Red Rising editions video,
Oh, those fairy loot ones?
Yeah.
Oh my
I was like, there goes a lot of my like side, money that I use for my channel. Like a
It
couple
was like
months
my birthday gift and my Christmas gift.
And
just
next year's
for that one edition. But
wow.
it's okay. They are pretty.
They better pay.
All right, so I have two for this. One is Into the Drowning Deep by Meyer Grant, which I think last year everyone and their mother was talking about this. It's like a horror book, and it only has like 22,000 ratings. And this is the same author of Every Heart a Doorway. I forget her name, if you guys know.
Shauna McGuire.
Yes. This is Evil Mermaids. So good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so creepy.
Yeah, it is. And that's all you need to know. Like, you don't have to know anything else.
Yeah.
And then something else that I think is sort of really popular in BookTube that is not as popular in real life is Finley Donovan is Killing It by El Casamano. This came out last year. I believe the second book just came out this year. This is a mystery novel. Yeah, I've heard so many people talk about this on BookTube. That's why I picked it up. And it's so good because it's like a very good beginner mystery book for someone that doesn't really read mysteries, and it's sort of fun. She's like the main character in the book is an author. Her name's Finley, and she's like talking to her publisher or something in like a Panera, and they're talking about she writes mystery books, and she's talking about how to kill this person, that person, and someone kind of like slips her a card and is like, I'll offer you this amount of money if you kill this guy. They think she's like a hit woman, and like all these shenanigans ensue from there. This is such a good book. But yeah,
It's so fun. I just finished that this morning.
Oh, really?
It was just so much fun.
It's so fun, right? And
Yeah.
it's not like doom and gloom like normal mysteries and stuff. I feel like it's, it's kind of crazy because you're dealing with murder, but it's still fun. Yeah.
Like very clever
Mhm.
the way it all unfolds.
Have you? I know I kind of made Jesse watch it, but have any of you watched What We Do in the Shadows?
No.
Oh, it's
Is it
like
good?
a documentary about vampires. I think it's super funny, but one of the vampires has a familiar named Guillermo,
Yeah.
and Guillermo just has to like do just the everything for them. And I'm bringing this up because at one point he's like, what would I do if I wasn't a familiar for a vampire? And he's like, I'd probably still work at Panera. I might be a vampire now. And I don't know why, but it always makes me laugh. And so you mentioning Panera, I can't hear Panera without thinking of Guillermo.
Where's the show? Like, is it on any streaming?
Yeah, I think Hulu, I believe.
Oh, cool.
Because it's normally on FX. And I think it goes to Hulu whenever it's streamed.
Tell me the name again so I can write it down because I'm old and I forget things.
What We Do in the Shadows. I think I've had Deshauna watch it. Actually, funny enough, Deshauna showed me a clip because one of the vampires is an energy vampire. So he just basically bores people all the time to like feed off of their energy. So he'll say all the like working hard but hardly work, or like he'll say all these silly goofy things, and he'll show him in the office like sharpening a pencil for a really long time and everyone else kind of being annoyed. And Deshauna showed me a clip of him feeding off of hate comments, like he was being a troll online, and people were like and he's like, it's not as pure, but you can get just funny that clip. And I'm like, what is this show? And I started watching it. I think it's hilarious.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And if you love Evil Mermaids, Ingrid, come on. Evil Mermaid,
this? Oh,
Prospero's Children. It's
Prospero's Children.
It's a portal fantasy trilogy where they go back in time to Atlantis, and there's like an evil witch and an evil mermaid who likes to drown people.
Oh, I like that.
What? I'm not having this.
Yeah.
Bringing in all of the. Is it slightly older?
Probably. I think it came out when I was in high school, and I'm older, so.
You're not older.
I know. Stop it.
You're 31, right?
Which in gay years means I'm like 95.
It's like, oh my God. What age is faster, dogs or
gay people?
Okay, yeah.
Gay people. Oh my God, Roger.
So I see this talked about, or I see this author talked about on BookTube all the time. but then I'm always surprised to see it's not all that popular outside of BookTube, and that would just be John Quinn. Whether you like Malice or you like the Bloodsworn, I think that everybody seems to be talking about his works here on BookTube. And then when I've gone to look at ratings, I'm surprised there aren't more. Because in my mind, it's up there. In my mind, it's up there in popularity with some of the other ones. But then you look it up and you're like, oh, I guess it's not as popular. I don't know. And I don't know why. But I think most people probably already, that's the thing, is on BookTube. If you've probably seen it, you probably don't need much introduction. I know Jesse loves Faithful and the Fallen.
I do. It's one of my favorites. It's so good.
I feel like poor Alex Nieves, I feel like he was talking about that series for so long, and then other people started reading it. And
yes, he was the original Malice
guy. Yeah. The next one, popular elsewhere, but
it's right here.
Where credits due.
I've read the first one.
I thought that the first one was the weakest, and I think it only gets better, but Elle will disagree with me.
Well, I also read it on a red-eye flight where I didn't sleep for like 24 hours, so I don't remember much about it.
I literally just watched your wrap-up, Roger, where you talked about that, and I kept thinking, like, oh my god, I would never have known what was going on if I was reading it, like, with no sleep. Oh, yeah.
Because I was talking to me about part of it, like, towards the end, and I was, like, sitting here, and I was like, what? She's like, oh, this one character, and I was like,
It was funny. I was like, didn't you just read it? And I was like, I read it last year. Didn't you just read it?
I read it in April.
Yeah, you just read it. Speaking of Alex and teasing him, I feel like I mentioned this before, but I'll mention Engines of Empire. Once again, another one that I've talked about a lot, but I don't feel like has been talked about. This is not popular on BookTube. This is a new release, so we have yet to see if it'll get popular. But I was waiting for him to finish it to see if he'd want to do some kind of like book chat about it. And then when I messaged him, I was like, hey, did you finish it? And he's like, yeah. I was like, did you want to do that book chat sometime? He goes, I don't really remember it. I was like, you just read it, Alex. But anyway, some books, they just in and then out.
It's
that
so
one,
relatable.
That one, though, for me, stuck. Like when you were talking about the Michael J. Sullivan, and you're talking about like the gut punches and stuff. I wouldn't say there was emotional gut punches, but there's a lot of like, oh shoot, kind of moments that I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. And anytime a book can do that, I don't know, I get excited. But anyway, now onto this one where it's popular elsewhere, but not on BookTube. I feel like this one's a little harder, unless you talk about older fantasy.
Not that much older. Yeah, this isn't from that long ago, but I don't even know if this is true. It is probably popular on BookTube, just not maybe the corner that I'm in. And it is older, so maybe that's why it's not talked about as much. But it's The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I mean, it had a movie adaptation with Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley in it, so I know it's popular elsewhere, but I just haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about it on BookTube. And I think it's spectacular. It's so unique. It's kind of like, it's sci-fi, but it feels kind of fantasy too, because you're on a different world, and your main character, he's this young man who has grown up on this planet that is not our own, where every man can read other people's thoughts. So like they are constantly invaded with like what they call the noise, where their heads are just constantly filled with other people's thoughts around them. And the story kind of starts off with you getting introduced to this main character, and all of a sudden he hears silence, which he never hears before. And he finds this young girl, and mysteries ensue from there because he's never met a girl before. He's only ever lived with men. So you're like, what is going on? Why are there only guys? Like, where are all the women? And it's really good. And it gets really like gritty as the series goes on. Like the second book is like really dark and gritty and very unexpected for like a YA series, but I thought it was just fantastic. And the way it's written, he's like uneducated. He never had like a formal schooling, so he is telling the story from his perspective, and like there's a ton of like grammatical mistakes because he being uneducated doesn't know how to spell things correctly or say these certain phrases correctly or whatever it is. And so it's kind of a weird reading experience, but I loved it. And I know, Elle, that you read it and you liked it too.
The way you were describing it, when you're like, when it was like you were telling like a class of little kids about a book.
Like, this is what the noise looks like in the book. So you can kind of see it.
Not
like,
expected for you to read through that, by the way.
No, you're not expected to read through it.
Because I know what was that one series? Illuminae? And I was like, do I have to read everything in this? Like some of those swirly things.
Yeah. But you don't have to read the noise. But it's really cool and unique, and I don't hear a lot of people talk about it. Yeah, that's mine.
Roger, you look like you were judging her.
Oh gosh,
No, I've never read that book, so I have no idea.
Another Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
2 more. Oh. So, I mean, it says on here that she's a New York Times bestseller, but the only other person I've ever heard talk about it is Sam from Thoughts on Tomes.
Mm-hmm.
And she's recently been getting back into them, and it's been making me very excited. I slip into her DMs all the time to be like, where are you now? But because nobody reads them. I made my husband read them too. So this is the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series. And so our main character is Anita Blake. She is a animator, so she raises zombies for a living to settle like court cases and stuff like that. And she gets tapped by the police special forces to help solve preternatural crimes. And she has like a degree in preternatural biology and stuff like that. So it's very classic urban fantasy, but it turns into reverse harem erotica for a solid 2 or 3 books. And then we kind of circle back to not so much of that, but it's great. And then I always hear people talk about evil fae, and it doesn't get much more evil than this because the fae are literally immortal. So the queen will straight up like pull out your intestines and step on them to torture you because you'll heal. So if you want evil fae, and it does kind of look like this one's much more romance based, I would say. Obviously, I mean, hello legs, but so I don't ever hear anybody talk about these on BookTube, especially not the Mary Gentry series. This is another one where she's like a fae princess, but she has kind of left the fae courts and she's working as a private investigator. And then she kind of gets dragged back into fae politics.
That weirdly, not that I've read it, but that sounds like Crescent City a little bit.
But better, not garbage, and there's less
awkward
tightening, less
awkward tightening. Oh Lord.
Less super soaker action when women are excited, more plot, more interesting development.
I haven't read the second book yet, and I'm terrified.
Don't read it. Don't read it. It's terrible.
I mean, yeah, it's an experience.
You know what? That's one that is popular and loved elsewhere, but not here on BookTube. I feel like so few people on BookTube are enjoying that.
I've seen a lot of people love it on BookTube.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of split.
Like, wonder if Joanna and Roger have seen that.
Shauna did. I know Reagan, I think, was it Monet also didn't like it? A bunch of people.
Yeah.
But
There's
I mean,
a couple that I watched them, and it's definitely that moment of like, did we read the same book?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I love Bryson Hunt. And I'm like, okay, so you love dishonesty in your relationships. Okay,
I love how I mean, it's my own fault because I brought it up, but I love how we've come back to this, Roger, after.
I'm always ready to just, I mean, somebody DM'd me about it earlier, and I was just like.
You know who has read Anita Blake, though, is Enrique, Roger.
Ooh, next time I talk to him, Enrique, hey.
Next time we play Ghost, you'll have to talk to him about it. Because I think
Has he read all of them?
I don't know how many he's read. You'll have to ask him.
Because it's up to almost book 30, which is kind of ridiculous. But
Oh,
I think I read like 3 or 4 of them. But I have to.
You haven't talked to me about it. You're gonna have to slip into my Voxer. Oh.
Well, I reread the first one and I just haven't kept going. I have to. Because it's pretty good. It's like a solid, urban fantasy,
get
even though it's a
better.
lot older.
That's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I feel bad, where I always have to tell people, like, you have to give it like the first 3 books, but like the books are literally like the first couple, like, come on. And then the
Mhm.
print is like relatively large for how tiny
Mhm.
these books are. So I'm kind of like, just read the first 3, because then you'll meet the creepy evil vampire council. You'll get to see some of the powers, because you get to meet Mort Demure and Belle Mort. So you have beautiful Death, who can like raise lust in people and suck off of your like lust energy. And then you have the Lover of Death, who feeds off of death energy.
Ooh.
You have the evil vampire council guy, who can control all different kinds of shapeshifters. There's one who can control the earth with his mind.
If they can make True Blood a show, why can't
But
they make that a
better.
show?
That's where I got, because Jashana and Ingrid were like, True Blood, and I was like,
It's
no,
so
I need a Blake.
good. True Blood, the show is really good.
The show, yes.
Yes.
Anyways, I think it's Elle's turn, right?
No,
Or
it's
is it
me.
Ingrid?
Skip me. I gotta grab it.
I'll just say mine really quick. And again, I feel like I talk about it all the time. So
Go ahead.
Blood Song by Anthony Ryan is
Oh,
very good. And it has,
Oh,
I'm always
yeah.
surprised because I think it's somewhere like 70,000 ratings. And I'm like, what? Really? Because I don't never see, but I rarely see people talk about that book, even though I think it's very good. But apparently other people have read it at some point, because let me double check. It has, almost 80,000 ratings, and it's at 4.4. So it's a lot of ratings and a very high average, but I don't see.
I have it. I just need to read it.
It's very, very good. It is someone's telling you their life story, and I just love the main character, Valen. And I always describe it as he basically goes to like Navy SEAL training, but for kids, like from the time he's a boy. He's being trained on how to be an elite soldier. But then as he gets, just the development too with his relationships with the other young boys, and how some of them start out as friends. And like, you've got the one kid that they're like, oh, I hate that kid. But then when you find out who that kid's parents are and their relationship, then like the other boys kind of feel bad and they try to be nice. And so you've got that's kind of wholesome, and you build these friendships throughout the book. But then as they're getting older, obviously they're starting to get into danger because they're being trained to be these soldiers. Then you kind of fear for them. And on top of that, because they're soldiers, they will be assigned tasks that they don't really get to question. But some of it is like, oh, well, I saw you as like an innocent boy growing into a man, and now you're being asked to do something kind of terrible. And you see them not really want to do it, and they have to grapple with that. And that's all they have is like this. Their entire life has been dedicated to this. And anyway, I love that character. Valen's great. So I really highly
read it. Everyone seems to love it.
Anyway, Ingrid, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Did you almost fall asleep?
What?
I said, did you almost fall asleep?
No, I was thinking about something. Shut up. I'm going to talk about a mystery thriller. It's Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. It has over 200,000 ratings on Goodreads.
Oh,
and I feel like mystery thriller horror doesn't really get a lot of time on BookTube to start off with. Like, I feel like there's not a lot of people that talk about them. Or it's like, I don't know if you guys feel the same way. It's like people are put into like boxes. So you either are like a mystery thriller reader, a horror reader, or a fantasy reader. You can't be all kinds of reader, I feel like. And I kind of read like everything. So I read a little bit of everything. This is really good. And I think I've only seen one person talk about it. Her name is Chapter Sachs on BookTube, and she reads a lot of horror. But I don't think she has filmed any videos in a while. But anyway, this is the story of two sisters, and one of the sisters' husband dies, and she kind of has to like go through his things, And as she's doing that, she finds out things about her husband that she wished she didn't know. So it's like all these things that I'm not even going to tell you anything else. That's all you need to know. But it's so good. But it's very dark. So you kind of have to go into it like with that mindset that it's heavy. It's a heavy book, but it's so good.
Sounds not quite the same, but it reminds me a little of that movie Gothica, I think it's called, with Halle Berry. Did any of you ever see that?
I've seen that, but I don't
Dive back to
remember.
like the early 2000s.
Yeah, I can picture the like cover in my head, like the DVD cover, but I don't remember any of the movie.
Halle
I know
Berry's
it's her face, right? Like, yeah.
perfect face. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. But aspects of what you were describing reminded me of that. Although that one's more like got a supernatural aspect to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know Jade. I can't remember if she's read that book or
Mhm.
if she's just read something by that author, Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, who also hasn't been able to post much as she had a baby and things.
Yeah.
But I remember this because she said her husband at first, I think there was a sticker over the author's first name, so he thought the title of the book was Slaughter Pretty Girls. It was like, no, that's not the name of the book.
That's funny.
And then for getting into our last prompt for today, popular author but a lesser known work. It's okay if the book itself is popular, it's just in comparison to the author's other works, maybe isn't talked about as widely.
Okay, I've got two. I'll mention the more popular one first, and it's City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. And I think he's more well known for Foundry Side, which I also love, but I know Al over here does not like. We don't have to talk about it. I love City of Stairs, though. I still like Foundry Side more, I think, but tonally, City of Stairs is completely different than Foundry Side. So I think if you don't like one, you might like the other, because this one feels much more like a murder mystery where you are in a world that has kind of been left behind by the gods. The gods used to rule and kind of made their own little societies and nations based on their kind of rule and their philosophy. And then they just disappeared. And there's circumstances behind that, but I won't say anything. And so you're kind of in this world now that's left behind by the gods. And the one nation that didn't have a god that created its nation is actually kind of the ruling nation. And it's really fascinating world building. I love like stuff with the gods in fantasy. That's like one of my favorite things. So I really like the world building, but the murder mystery aspect of this novel is also super engaging. And I really like the main characters. The magic at times, there was like horror elements in this, which I was so here for. I thought it was so creepy in some parts. There was like a straight up horror scene in this book and I loved it. So I just think that this is a fantastic series that's not quite as popular as his Foundry Side one. And I think that definitely if like you don't like Foundry Side, check this one out.
I want to add, I just looked into it. So I think Foundry Side is definitely more popular on BookTube. But as of right now, it has fewer ratings than City of Stairs. But City of Stairs is older. So
yeah, it's quite a bit older, I think.
Foundry Side has over 27,000, and then City of Stairs, which came out in 2014, has like 31,000.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't see people talk about it very often on BookTube, at least. This one's like combined with the previous prompt too. But I definitely I have that other cover, the one that's more black and white. So I definitely plan to do it.
More this cover I like more than the American covers. I got it
at my used bookstore. So if I really like it, maybe I'll
the other one I will mention is Adrian Tchaikovsky, Guns of the Dawn, which Alan made me read, and I'm so glad he did because this was like my favorite book of the year so far, I think. It is like Pride and Prejudice in a military fantasy novel. And it is so much fun. It follows this kind of like prim and proper woman who is drafted into the military. And it is fascinating. I loved this book. I like military fantasy, I'm realizing. So if you like kind of the military strategy and boots on the ground, like following like soldiers in combat and kind of how they have to like get out of certain situations, it's so good. But then it's also like dealing with themes of like, how do you know you're really fighting for the right side? Like, what do you do when maybe your country's not being honest with you about like the circumstances around the war? It's so good. And like the main character just feels like a character out of a Jane Austen novel. And there's this very like Pride and Prejudice romance in it. So love this one. And I don't see a lot of people talk about this one, but I see a lot of people talk about Adrian Chbosky. So that's my second pick.
I know. I really want. Ever since you did the like my friends pick my TBR,
Yeah.
I wanted to read that, especially because it beat mine. It only beat mine because it was a standalone. Okay. Otherwise, and you know what? I still feel like I won that challenge because the challenge is to find a book specifically for you. And Alan was like, "This isn't at all what Jesse usually likes, but I still think
That's true."
Mine was like, "This is everything Jesse likes."
That is true.
I still feel I won.
Okay.
I like
You think that.
when,
You can think
I like
that.
when people are surprised when they're like, "You're competitive," and Roger knows from playing Ghost of Tsushima with me all the time.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, Roger, your turn.
Okay, so the first one is everybody always talks about the Winter Night Trilogy by Katherine Arden, and this is her like spooky middle grade series. And this book in particular is book number 2, and it actually is like quite creepy. Like it was definitely like one of those things. I was reading it. The first one is called Small Spaces. This is book number 2. And I was reading it very late at night in the dark. Would not recommend. It is actually quite creepy, but it's very fun. And I don't ever hear anybody talk about this. I always ever hear about The Bear and the Nightingale.
Mm-hmm.
And then Elle and I were talking earlier about Percy Jackson. And so everybody always talks about Percy Jackson, but I never hear any love for the Kane Chronicles, which is his Egyptian mythology series, which has hieroglyphic magic, which is much cooler than Greek gods. So if you like Egyptian mythology, and this one's only 3 books versus Percy Jackson, which is what, like 5, and then a follow-up 5 or whatever. So there's this. And then my real choice is kind of cheating. But just because I want to talk about the Forgotten Realms again, don't judge me. So this is R.A. Salvatore's The War of the Spider Queen, even though he doesn't write any of the books in the series. But he's more famous for the Drizzt books, which are these ones back here. But this series is by far superior. So this this has to do with basically the Drow, which are the dark elves, live in caverns beneath the main continent in a city, in a bunch of cities. And their goddess is she's kind of like this demon goddess called Lolth, who is the Spider Queen. And at some point she goes silent. And the way that the magic works in this world is there's like arcane magic where they pull from the weave, and then there's like more priestly magic where they pull it directly from their god or goddess that they worship. And so when she goes silent, the matriarchy in this society is priestesses of Lolth, and they lose their power. And they send a group of people off to try to travel to the demon web pits to find their goddess, to find out what happened. Why did she go silent? And so if you like morally not so great people who stab each other in the back at all turns and all of that kind of stuff, this is very that.
Sounds good.
All right, so let me grab it real quick.
She's so engaged and listening while you're talking.
Yes, of course. I feel like this is kind of cheating because this author is overall super popular, but I was just looking at the rating, or like the number of ratings, and the Assassin's Apprentice
It's gonna be
is the
Live
first
Ship
one of the
Traders, isn't it?
Farseer. You know, I was going to say this, has 272,000 ratings. And I tried to read that book and I couldn't. And the first book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy has only like 50,000 or something ratings. And this is so good. So good. It's all this magic about ships. I'm sure you guys heard about it, but the ships are alive, and there's all this like political intrigue. There's a lot of emotional like gut punching in this book, and it's just so good. Like this is my first read from Robin Hobb, but I thought this was really good. I did try to read the first book in the Farseer trilogy, and I couldn't get through it. So
You just don't like the trauma porn? I said you just don't like the trauma porn with cruelty to animals?
this was a while ago, so I don't remember exactly, but I just remember being super bored in that book. And this book is like kind of slow too. There's a lot of like character building and world building and stuff, but it's never boring, you know?
Yeah.
And I started reading this, and before I did, I looked up like, should you read the first trilogy first? Can you skip it or whatever? And there's like both sides of, people arguing. And I read this book and I felt like I could get into it super easily without having to know the previous trilogy.
That makes me really excited. I actually found that one at my local bookstore, and I was like, I'm going to grab it because I think it was that edition.
Mhm.
And I still need to finish the Farseer trilogy. But I didn't love Assassin's Apprentice, but I have heard people say that series is better, or that if you don't like one, you might still like the other. And so hearing you talk about it makes me really excited. Okay, earlier before we started the video, I looked up. I was like, I know this is lesser known for this author, but how many ratings are there? And I think there are still 60,000. I'm like, gosh, darn it. It's Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. So obviously most people know Sanderson through his Cosmere.
Mhm.
And then I think I didn't check the Skyward series, how many ratings that Skyward has.
It has 100,000. I checked too.
Okay. So Skyward, we can definitively say is more popular than Arithmetist, but Arithmetist is one of my favorites. I mean, it's hard to pin down because I love Sanderson's works. But I just think this one's so fun. And was it you, Roger, I was joking around with about how I'm that person every year when he does his State of Sanderson, that when he's like, other works, and then he mentions Arithmetist, he's like, still no updates. And I'm like, no, because I want the sequel. And it does not, like, Warbreaker and Elantris, and like Warbreaker, people are like, okay, we know that he wants to write a sequel, but it also 100% is a standalone currently and can forever be a standalone. This one cannot. The ending is so like kind of cliffhanger ending that you're like, come on, man. And the magic is so fun. Sean describes it I've described it to him, and then he always makes everything more fun. So it's like magic chalk monsters, he calls it, because they use chalk to draw these defensive circles, and they have these other shapes. So it's like kind of geometry mixed in, and the different shapes and how accurately, if I'm remembering correctly, how accurately you draw them makes your defenses better. But then you also have to draw little like creatures that you send out to attack the other person's defense. And it seems like it's just all fun. And there is a kind of school setting. Our main character really wishes that he was Arithmetist, and he's not. And then this girl that he knows is one. And he's really good he knows everything about the magic, whereas the girl who can use the magic isn't very good at it, but I think she's really good at drawing. And so they kind of tag team it, and their friendship is really cute. But there's also this like murder mystery in the school because all these kids go missing. And there's also more with the magic. It's not just fun at the school. There's actually that on a much larger scale that can be used sort of as a weapon. So it's really fun. And I don't know if every edition has it, but there's like drawings. Look at instructing chalklings is what they're called. And there's like little drawings in there. And there's also illustrations in the book of the different shapes for the defense circles and stuff. So it like maps it out for you. Like, this is how this one works. And this is how, it's just such a fun magic system. The characters I all really liked. I thought it started very quickly because some Sanderson books can take a while. So Arithmetist, I just think it's fun. I just think it's such a good time all around.
So speaking of stirring the pot, Jessie May, how about that Cytonic though?
Good Lord.
You didn't like it?
I couldn't stand it. I have ranted so many times.
Are you serious? Oh, I'm so
Did you read it?
Yes, I loved it. I loved all 3 books.
I'm sorry, but the answers that we get at the end of Cytonic, they make no sense. They just, what? What was it?
Roger, what have you done?
What was
It
that?
makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Now
Ryan
imagine
really
Buddy,
out here.
imagine Buddy
my
with her.
God.
It's like, okay, hold on. So frustrated.
Have you guys read the short stories in that series yet?
No, but
Yeah,
I need to.
I've read the I haven't read the newest one, but I
Me
read
neither.
the
Yeah, the other
Same.
two.
I've read
I read
the other
those
two.
and I really liked it. I thought
I
that
liked
it.
those too. I liked those more than Starsight.
I think I will like those more than Cytonic, so I need to pick them up, but I still have such a sour taste in my mouth.
For me, Skyward,
Mhm.
the novellas, and then I think honestly, maybe Cytonic and then Starsight. I don't know. I think I had different. I don't know. Now that I've thought on it, I mean, I didn't love Starsight. I really liked Skyward.
I love Skyward.
I'm hoping the last one really brings it home because of some things that we've set up in Cytonic and the things that we've been getting in the novellas that I'm like, I think we might get more Skyward type of a story, because Skyward's so fun because of like the way they all band together and the friendship.
Camaraderie.
Yes, it's really fun, and I feel like in the other ones it's kind of it's almost like a Sanderson flex of like, look how creative I am.
Mhm.
So I miss the characters hanging out and dealing with
bad.
together.
I feel
I'm
like
waiting.
I have like totally different opinion from you guys. I really liked Starsight. And I think it's
I liked Starsight. That one, like, it started kind of getting a little weird.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, like the slugs, I got it. Okay, I can go with this. But then
You have to read the short story.
I know. But then
I just want to say really quick. We are still live, so don't go into spoilers.
I will not spoil.
Okay.
But the answer at the end of Cytonic, you know which one I'm talking about, that I've been waiting. I've been like, what is this thing? It's so interesting. And we get the answer, and I'm just like, that makes no sense. That's not possible at all. Not even with magic.
But I feel like
I need to mute you. You're getting really loud.
I need to turn
You have
down.
to learn microphone control here.
Sorry.
No,
Oh
I'm
my
not.
God.
I can get loud, but
Sorry. I'm probably gonna wake up my daughter.
oh my gosh. I feel like I don't know. I feel like for me it's Starsight and then the short stories and then Cytonic and then Skyward.
oh,
Like I
wow.
think Skyward was my least favorite.
Very different.
But I like love all of them, obviously. Like if I didn't like Sky, but I feel like they're getting better as it goes on, as opposed to like the best book was the first one. You know what I mean?
I'm more similar to you. I think I like Cytonic the best because I liked the weird.
Yeah.
And then I like
Yeah, you like it's just too weird.
I think
I
in
just
the
couldn't be the
first
only
one,
person triggered in this video by Al poking at House of Sky and Breath. I just felt like I needed somebody else to be triggered too.
I feel like Jessie tries. She tries to be like, well, someone didn't like this. And I'm like, yeah. That's why that video we did a while back of Let's Argue, where we kind of make fun of each other's favorites. And I feel like nobody could rile me up because it was just like, well, I don't really like this one. And I'm like, that's okay. I understand.
I was like, I don't like Witcher. And she's like, yeah, I get it.
You should just have a copy of Fireborn and set it on fire, and that might get a rise out of her.
Mhm.
You know, I would be like, you know what? It's your own copy. And that's too bad.
Level-headed. I like it. Oh.
Well, I feel like I often, the things that people don't like about books, I'm like, I 100% agree that what you don't like exists in that book. And if you don't like it, I get then why you wouldn't like that book. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like everything Jessie feels about Witcher, I'm like, I feel too. I just love these characters so much already. And so I have that going in as well.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have the love for those characters, I would probably not love that series. Speaking of Witcher, last thing we'll mention is they have these beautiful editions finally coming out in English. And then they have the stupid, as seen on Netflix, thing on all of them in the whole series. Every single one has that little thing somewhere on the cover. And I'm like, why? These covers are great. Why would you do
And
that?
it's not even a sticker, right? Like they print it on the thing. Like if you want to put that freaking sticker, put their sticker on and then we can take it off. Like I don't get why they do that.
Speaking of shouting when I was making fun of Jessie earlier, I was so frustrated. Because Roger sent me the picture of it and I was like, okay, hold on a second. Maybe you put that on the first one. Maybe the second. But do you think by book 4, I'm going to be like, oh, that's right. It's on Netflix. And then like go and I already know, we all already know it's on Netflix. I don't, it's so frustrating to me. I understand why they do it. I feel like it's actually for the reverse reason that they want people who have seen it on Netflix to be like,
So
no,
bad.
not those ones. Not those
Oh.
ones. They have ones
No,
that
there's a
the
new one.
spawns are going to all create an image.
Ooh.
I haven't seen this.
Oh, that is pretty.
Those are so cool.
Yeah.
Those are so cool.
They don't come out till July, I think, from Orbit.
And I think they're going to be taller. I mean, I'm probably still going to get them.
I'm sure you're going to get him.
I just don't like the stickers, or the permanent stickers, we'll call them.
They're not even stickers.
On that note,
Elle, when I look up Witcher book covers, your video pops up. It's like the first result.
yeah,
That's very impressive.
Mhm.
Good job.
because I've been talking about Witcher for years.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was good to end on. Thank you for getting me all riled up right before dinner.
It was entertaining.
Oops.
Thanks everybody for joining. This was a lot of fun. But yeah, whenever this goes up, if people could leave their underrated and underhyped recommendations, or if they want to answer the prompts, I'd love to see everybody else's answers. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Go check everybody's channels out, and we'll see you all.
And
later.
maybe get some merch with a narwhal.
Yes. I'm not wearing my narwhal one today, but I have a magnet, and the magnet is holding up my little like thank you note from the donation from last year on the fridge.
That's so cute.
It's very wholesome. And then my magnet that I got from the Redwoods, and those two together hold up the little thing.
Oh, that's adorable.
Anyway, yeah, what Roger said, go get some merch.
Yay.
Thanks, everybody.